What it is, cuckolds. I waited tonight to do this video because my original goal was to do a review of that AEW pay-per-view. However, the way that it ended made your boy sick, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what Christian Cage has to do to become world champion. It's like, and this influenced me to do this other video instead, you know? Like, we got people like John Moxley who are just mid at best, you know what I mean? And then we have great ones like Christian, who for some reason, throughout their entire careers, don't get the respect that they deserve. Now, a lot of you know that Christian Cage is my favorite wrestler of all time. But even if you weren't, right, the point here is that there's a lot of mediocrity running around, and in the fringes, we have some greatness that has to pretty much back down to this mediocrity. And the one reason that I can choose and that I can pinpoint as being the catalyst for this is, of course, that's right, you heard me before, you're gonna hear it again, the neckbeard demographic. They are to blame for absolutely everything that has gone on with wrestling for the last, at this point, nearly 20 years, okay? Wrestling has gone from being one of the coolest things in the world, right? Where actual cool people, intelligent people, attractive people would watch wrestling. There's still some of us left, but the vast majority of the fans are neckbeard nerds, okay? And I have an increasing hatred that is brewing up in the depths of my soul with respect to these people. Yesterday, I put up a poll on the Haters channel about the recent 5-star rating that Dave Meltzer gave to the Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn match. Then, on that same pay-per-view, he gave the men's match, the men's Elimination Chamber match, 4.75 stars. Now, I watched that match. That was, in my opinion, one of the worst Elimination Chambers of all time because nothing happened, right? We saw like 3 finishers in a 6-man match, and 2 people were eliminated with the useless and now very commonly used wrestling trope of, you pinned me, so now I'm going to screw you over. That happened twice in one match. And according to Dave Meltzer, this effectively is the best chamber match of all time. Really? Is this better than the one where Edge won the World Heavyweight title after losing the WWE Championship on the first match of the night? Is it? I don't think so. Is it better than the one where Shawn Michaels came in and super kicked The Undertaker, allowing Jericho to win? Is it better than the first one? Fuck out of here with that bullshit, you know what I mean? This isn't even better than the ECW one with like Test and Bobby Lashley. But anyways, this is not a symptom at this point. This is now the main problem, right? Triple H is a massive cuck who basically has acquiesced to the neckbeard demographic. Now, hey, business is business, you know? You got like 1.5 million fans. Raw viewership is a complete disaster at this point, right? Hopefully it bounces back up a little bit with the aftermath of Elimination Chamber. But even if it does, you know the next week it's going to go down the shitter again, right? It's basically hovering at like 2.4 or 2.6 million on a 7-day period, right? So they've completely gaslit us into thinking that this is a viable metric for how to measure viewership, right? Back in the day, here's how it worked. You know, how many people tuned in to your show live? Now, it's, forget about that. If they just measure that, it's going to be like 600,000 people, like nobody gives a fuck. You know, now they have to measure globally, number one, right? Globally. Back in the day, it was just the U.S., right? They would just measure the U.S., and that's how you got your 8 million viewers, you know? 8 million Americans in America tuned in live, right? And then countless millions of other people around the world did the same, but we didn't even count those people. Now it's global audiences over a 7-week period. And then I saw that there were 5.5 or so million hours of Raw watched. That means that if you actually use the metrics that they told us they would use, they've already lied to us multiple times, right? They said that they would divide the number of viewership hours, right, by the total runtime of the show. So if the show is 3 hours and you get 6 million hours viewed, you take 6 million, divide by 3 hours, and you get 2 million views, right? 2 million full views of your episode. You know, so this is the most correct way to do it. In my opinion, you do it in one day, you know? But that's not how they're doing it. They're doing it completely differently. They're ignoring that too, because if you divide 5.5 by 3, you're under 2 million, cucks. And the hater has been validated this entire time. People got all excited. Oh, the first episode of Raw got 5.6 million. And it's like, some people actually believed it was going to just stay at that, right? It's just absurd. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. You know, we have to answer why this is happening. Why are the ratings dropping at such a staggering rate, even within like a 3-month period? You know, now again, the 5.6 million is inflated, so it's not fair to say that they dropped by 50%, even though they did, right? It's not fair because that was a one-off, that was an offshoot. Like, nobody thought they were going to get 5 million consistently. Like, they're lucky to even be in the top 10 shows of Netflix. You know, this is Raw, which was at one point basically the #1 show on cable television. You understand me? Now it's not even top 10 on Netflix. It's competing with like some Scandinavian detective drama. You know what I mean? That 5 people watched in Norway, 6 people watched in Sweden, and more people watched than Raw in America and globally. You understand me? The symptoms are no longer symptoms. They are the actual problem. Now, we had a voice in wrestling. It's called the voice of Vincent Kennedy McMahon, who, for better or for worse, he's not perfect in his booking, and certainly not perfect as a human, but in his booking, he at least served as a voice of reason, right? At the end of the day, right, you can say what you want. Vince McMahon is probably one of the most alpha men of all time. He is that dude, you know what I mean? He does not take his cues from anybody. He's Vincent Kennedy McMahon. You understand? Other people like Triple H, quite frankly, I think we have enough evidence now to say that Triple H doesn't have the backbone to be a Vince McMahon. Now, that's not that big of a deal because few men do. But the reality is that Triple H is a suggestible cuckold, right? It's very simple, you know? Around when ROH started, you know, they had a guy called CM Punk. This guy's moves look like shit. They've looked like shit his entire career. They have a fat guy called Samoa Joe, who honestly is overrated. I'm going to just say it. Samoa Joe is nothing special, you know what I mean? He's Bull Dempsey, he's Obafemi, he's just a bunch of jobbers. He's nothing special, and they made it seem as if Samoa Joe was like the destined one, right? They tried to do the same thing with Keith Lee, it didn't work. You know, it didn't work with Samoa Joe either. You know, Samoa Joe had a few good runs, no doubt about it, but if we're being honest, like I got into a debate with somebody online, right? Aside from like Samoa Joe's initial X Division run, which I will argue led to his eventual match with Kurt Angle, after that, Samoa Joe has been a mid-carder at best. He's done nothing since then. And that was like 15, 20 years ago. He's done nothing like since his mid-20s to even remotely come close to being a legend. People are like, he's one of the best ever. No, he isn't. That's just a bold-faced lie. And the problem is that people like Triple H have acquiesced to the neckbeard identity. Now, the neckbeards have one head neckbeard. That is Dave Meltzer, right? He is the one that started this circle jerk. He's the one, and you know what? I got to give him props because he did what Triple H cannot do. He took his own opinion and didn't care about what anybody else said. You know, we were told, for example, that Hulk Hogan is the best wrestler of all time. Dave Meltzer was like, well, I don't think so. I think that Matsuhara Mikituki from like, you know, Big Japan, you know, Little League Wrestling, I think that guy's better because he has a better work ethic or whatever. He has more work rate. You know, he's more crisp in the ring. And all these terms started being birthed and consumed by the neckbeard demographic, right? Like I get into arguments with people on random ass YouTube videos. Like there was a video with Chris Van Vliet and AJ Styles. AJ Styles was like, oh, the 6-sided ring was really hard to work in. And someone was like, people should care about what the wrestlers think. And I wrote, I don't give a damn what they think. Just entertain me. You know what I mean? I'm tired of people complaining about everything. So it's like, they put their, and you know, you hear these neckbeard platitudes, right? They're like, they put their lives on the line for our entertainment. No, they don't. They do it for a paycheck. AJ Styles is not going to be jumping off of ladders for free. You know, and that's one thing that we need to like kind of understand in this country. You know, like there's a few jobs that are made more heroic than they need to be. You know what I mean? Like one of them is wrestler, obviously, but you know, and this is going to be a bit controversial, but people in the armed forces, you know, like one time the hater was at a bar, right? This was during the hater's alcoholic days, and I was young, you know, I went to the bathroom taking a piss. There's this guy outside. He's all mumbling and being pissed off, and I'm like, what's wrong, bro, when I came out, right? And he's like, man, this guy wouldn't let me cut in line in the bathroom. And I was like, why should he, you know? And he's like, I'm a war hero. I went to Afghanistan. And I'm like, oh my God, shut the fuck up, bro. I'm tired of this shit. First of all, the hater knows a lot of combat veterans, and the hater has a lot of respect for them. These are real dudes, right? They're combat veterans. Now, the hater also knows a bunch of people that went to the army and did bullshit like flying drones. You're not the same thing, motherfucker. Unless you're out there throwing your life on the line, I have no respect for, like, if you happen to be a cook in the army. Oh, you're a chef. Oh, where did you work, Fridays? No, I worked in the army. Oh, I don't care. You get the same respect as the guy that worked on Fridays. I don't give a fuck, man. Everybody wants more respect than they deserve. You know, like the real jobs that deserve respect, like farmers, healthcare workers, they shut the fuck up. They don't even ask for it. You know, these are people that are feeding us, feeding America, and they don't, like, you don't ever hear them, I'm a hero, but you hear people, you know, riding for these motherfuckers, you know? Not just the army, because, you know, the army is cool at the end of the day. They do have some balls, but with wrestlers, they're like, oh, they put their bodies on the line for my entertainment. I don't want them to. Don't. I was much more entertained by The Rock and Stone Cold, who never put their bodies on the line. Do that. Show me that. I have no respect for, like, Axiom, because Axiom does flippy things. I have the respect that I would have for any athlete, you know? But I'm not like, oh, he's doing me a favor. I'm not doing me a favor. I'm paying money to see this shit. You know? I'm paying you, motherfuckers. You're not doing it for free. Exactly. So with that being said, during this entire circle jerkery of Dave Meltzer, right, we found ourselves with all these terms. And all of a sudden now people are reevaluating the likes of Dean Malenko, a nobody jobber that, like, now is supposed to be this, like, great hero of wrestling. People are like, he's in my top 5. Like, I don't give a fuck about your top 5. Your top 5 is retarded, and it's there just to make you sound like you know more than you do. Oh, Nabunishi Shakataki, like, he's in my top 5. Nobody knows who he is. Oh, I like Frank Gotch. No, you don't. You don't even know what that is. You don't know these people, man. Like, I got into an argument with someone. They're like, Miami Toyota is the best women's wrestler. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck that is. Right? The person's like, then you're not a real wrestling fan. Okay, fine, bro. I'm not a real wrestling fan because I didn't go hunt down like a flea market DVD of some broad who can do like 3 basic moves and then to lose my cool because I'm jizzing my pants looking at her. Like you, neckbeard. That's not how it works for the majority of us, right? The majority of fans are casual fans. And the majority of casual fans don't have the nerves to go and establish whether Dean Malenko was better than, like, you know, his father, Boris Malenko. Nobody gives a fuck about either of these guys. You know, and I'm sick of this, man. In wrestling, this happens all the time. It happens a lot with the Samoans, but all of a sudden you see, like, oh, here's like Steve Von Erich and like Kyle Von Erich, the new Von Erichs. It's like, great. I don't know who the fuck the old Von Erichs are, and none of you do. Oh, the Von Erichs were great. No, they weren't. The Hardy Boys are better, and we all know it. Come on, man. And this is the kind of disingenuous nonsense that we have to tolerate, right? Where now, you know, in the past, Triple H and Jeff Jarrett and the likes of the people that were in charge of wrestling, they understood. They were like, okay, great. Like, you know, Rey Bucanero is interesting enough. I'll bring him to TNA for like the World X Cup, right? But then when it's time to establish the new X Division champion, it's going to be AJ Styles. It's not going to be Rey Bucanero because Rey Bucanero is over in Mexico. I don't give a fuck about Rey Bucanero. At this point, you might as well push my hometown hero, Felipe Escalante, up in this pace. You know, and that's the problem. Jeff Jarrett and Vince McMahon were reasonable gatekeepers. They were like, hold on a second. I don't give a fuck that some little Mexican kid in Mexico was inspired by El Pantero Jr., you know, at some point in his childhood to go and become a luchador. This doesn't sell tickets and nobody gives a fuck about it. So I'm going to find a guy called The Rock who could bury everybody on the mic and entertain millions and literally millions of people, right? We're at the point now where for SmackDown, you can't say millions and millions of viewers because they don't even have 2 million, right? Like The Rock can't say the millions and millions of Rock fans. Millions of people aren't watching anymore, you know? And the reality is that part of this is the fault of Triple H because basically he has been bamboozled, he has been gorgamoned by good old Dave Meltzer, who has his own agenda and good for him, you know what I mean? Like, I can't even slight Dave anymore. Like, he's doing what he wants to do. You know, he says, like, I think Kevin Owens is good. People don't have the critical thinking to realize, hey, wait a second, what if Dave Meltzer is wrong? They're just like, damn, it's good. Kevin Owens, he's really the best wrestler I've ever seen. Like, that's another problem. Like, a lot of the wrestling fans are, like, straight up retarded, you know? So, like, with that being said, it's like we have nobody to listen to. Basically, the only people that are left are the hater and a few others, you know? People that are like, hold on a second, use your own faculties, right? Use some critical thinking. You really believe that Andrade versus Johnny Gargano is better than Triple H and Stone Cold, 3 stages of hell? If you believe that, that's like, I understand everyone has their opinions, But that's an opinion with no foundational basis. Oh, Andrade did a drop toe hold better. Nobody cares. It's a fake sport. And that's also at the center of this, because people want to judge it like a real sport. The neckbeard demographic who lives in fantasy land 99% of the time, these are the same people that have waifu pillows, right? They're like, oh, I like Mitsumi from like My Hero Academia or whatever, right? You know, I like her, she's my wife. No, she's not, weird fuck. She's a cartoon character, sick bastard, all right? That's not how that works. You know, these people want to make the make-believe into real world stuff. They probably envision themselves, well, if I was part of the crew of Pokemon, I would be next to Ash and I would show him that I'm the real trainer. I would catch a Charizard and a Blastoise and destroy his Bulbasaur. Like, it's the kind of way that people think, you know? And they think the same way with wrestling, right? They think they're like, well, you know, we have to value this on the athletics and on the actual wrestling ability. There is no wrestling ability. It's a fake sport. There is no ability involved. It's a bunch of choreography, right? Now, some of them, like Ricochet, are independently athletic in the sense that, like, Ricochet can do things that I could never do. He can do things that most wrestlers can never do. But I can do most of the shit that they do. Like, I can do basically every move Sol Sikoa does, I can do. You know? I can do it. If you let me train for a week, I would be as good as Sol Sikoa. And I think most people would be. Because it takes nothing to be as good as Sol Sikoa. So we're not judging Sol Sikoa on how well he does a Samoan spike, which is a fake move. We're judging him on how well they can entertain us. You know what I mean? And that used to be the metric. Vince McMahon was like, yo, I don't want anybody to feel commonplace, right? That was the entire philosophy of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. Nobody here is a regular person. Everyone here, even the jobbers, have something going for them. You know what I mean? It's that simple, right? Like, even if you had, like, for example, James Ellsworth. He's like a regular guy, but he's funny looking. Right? So there's something there for people to look at and be like, oh, look, James Ellsworth, isn't that funny? Right? There's something there for a jobber. Better to have him as a jobber than Cedric Alexander. What does that add? Cedric Alexander's just like a regular wrestler, you know? He's vanilla, but he's not goofy looking. He's a regular looking athletic guy, and nobody needs that, right? And that's the problem. The problem is we are so okay with mediocrity, and Triple H is pushing this garbage so much that eventually we're left with our hands on our balls, right? And all we can do at this point is wait. Every couple of times, or every couple of years, but let's just be honest, you know, the last few years, every few, 2 or 3 times a year, they'll give us something to wet our beaks. The most recent thing is Cena's heel turn. It's already been like, I think 2 weeks, at least 1 week, right? It's been a minute, and there's been, 1 week, and there's been no fallout from it at all. They just keep showing us the same thing that happened again and again because they know they have to milk it as much as they can. That's what this era is. It's the milk it era, right? They just milk everything, and then eventually people are like, I'm tired of this. And then they're like, oh, you are? Well, Jacob Fatu got a silly haircut. Don't you want to see that and replays of that for another 9 months? That's the problem. Nobody is thinking short term. This long-term booking thing is just an excuse for shitty bookers like Triple H to say they're good at their jobs. Basically, long-term booking is, I know that it seems like nothing's happening, but something will happen one day. Yeah, I know, dumbass. I know that you have a few things up your sleeve at some point. You know, maybe like one day you'll be like, oh, The Rock is a homosexual now. You know, and people will be like, oh, that's great. We never saw that coming. And they'll be like, yeah. That's great long-term booking. Like, what about John Cena's heel turn? Was that long-term booking? No, that was a sudden decision made in a moment of panic. Nobody knew what the fuck they were going to do for WrestleMania. And they're like, oh, we have no plans because everyone sucks. They looked around their roster and they're like, oh, maybe Vince was right. Maybe we should hire developmental talent like Mason Ryan. You hire 10 Mason Ryans, you find one Batista. You know what I mean? You hire 10, like, big, strong black guys. 9 might suck, but you might find one Lashley, right? This is the philosophy of wrestling. Nowadays, you watch like WWE LFG, and Booker T has to just straight up lie to your face. Like, you know he doesn't mean it. Booker T's like, Anthony Luke, man, this guy's going to be a star. And I'm like, you know Booker T doesn't believe that. You know he knows that's not going to happen. Like, we all know that's not going to happen. We all know that Drake Moreau is not going to be a massive star. Even like whatever BJ, that guy's going to be another Grayson Waller. Like, you know, he's not going to be anything special either. You know, everybody there is complete mediocres. Like, completely. You know, not one person there has any modicum of star power. You look at NXT, not one person has any modicum of star power. You're all going to be really upset when all of a sudden, like, Obafemi has like a Karrion Kross type run, and everyone's going to be like, wow, you know, we know nobody saw that coming. And this is why it frustrates me, because the hater sees these things coming a mile away. When they said Karrion Kross was going to be huge, I was like, I don't know what everyone sees in this guy. There's nothing here at all, right? And it's like, you don't even need to be a wrestling fan to know this. If you've been, quite frankly, if you've been around enough cool people, you know what's cool and what's not. And a lot of people, like I said, even some of my fans, unfortunately, you know, they were big Karrion Kross guys. And the only thing I can think of is like, these people are just like, they were never popular. You know, nobody invited them to parties. They're just like dorks who are trying to find their way. There's nothing wrong with that, you know? But the idea is when you are like that, you look at Karrion Kross, someone tells you he's good, you don't know what's good, you don't know what's cool, so you're like, oh, I'll listen to them, maybe this guy's cool. Then all of a sudden everyone turns on him, they're like, this guy sucks. The hater from day one, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy? It's like an asshole that comes out with an hourglass, flips it upside down and says TikTok and leaves. Wow, how compelling, right? Same thing with Obafemi. This is my jungle. Is it? Go fuck yourself. You know what I'm saying? How about entertain me a little bit, cuck? You know? And that's the problem. It's a series of mediocres just coming in and out, you know? We get a few good ones here and there, like LA Knight, Braun Breaker, you know? Gunther is like a massive mediocre. That's one that the fans are also going to get wrong, you know? I know he's like the world heavyweight champion, but clearly as we are reminded on a yearly basis, nobody gives a shit about the World Heavyweight title. Like, for 2 WrestleManias in a row, it's been relegated to like the nobody title. Nobody cares at all. Like, it's not even close. You know, the WWE title is clearly the number one. The World Heavyweight title is effectively a third mid-card title. They just don't want to call it that for some reason. Like, Gunther is no different now than when he was Intercontinental Champion, right? And you know what? Like, that's fine. You can have that title. The pretend title. You can have Obafemi come up and become the World Heavyweight Champion. You could present it as a big deal. But it's not a big deal because this title, as it stands, is never going to main event WrestleMania, you know? Like, it's years away from that. Years, maybe decades at this point. But the reality is what the reality is, cucks. For better or for worse, this type of mediocrity needs to come to an end because it's not sustainable. You know, there comes a point where it's all going to collapse. That point, I'm starting to believe, is closer than we think. We're almost at the end, motherfucks. Now, wrestling one way or another is never going to go away, right? WWE probably is never going to go away. But the reality is that they're on a decline. Now, people can say they made more money last year than the year before. Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can fudge up a balance sheet and count things differently, basically, and say you're doing well. And that's what's happening here. Like if WWE, for example, gets this massive deal that Netflix is going to pay them, then this is a massive deal. They're getting paid billions. But the reality is that this company, at its current financial health, is not worth billions. It's at the cusp. There's going to be a significant drop-off in revenue at some point, right? Or they're going to do what they've been doing for the last 3 years, right? Just putting a sponsor in every corner. That's all that's happening. They're just selling out more and more. You know, I will say this about the AEW pay-per-view, right? There were like, if you count the pre-show, there's like, what, like 15, 16 matches? Like, I'm not even sure how many there were. But the reality, I mean, you know, not that it was great or anything because Christian Cage got bamboozled, he got screwed. But the reality is that we had 12 full matches, 12 it looks like. 12 matches, including three pre-shows, right? Now, the hater doesn't really like AEW, but I'd much rather watch this than watch, like, I don't know, fucking, you know, Backlash or something, right? Where it's going to be 4 matches, none of which involve anything important happening. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you'll get Gunther or Cody Rhodes. Like, when was the last time we had both Gunther and Cody Rhodes defend their titles, like, at the pay-per-view? I don't think it's ever happened. Like, I don't think Cucky and Gunther have defended their titles at the same pay-per-view ever, you know? Because there's always something going on. Cucky has to team with Roman Reigns to make him interesting. Gunther isn't there because she's in Austria jacking off, you know? But the point is, like, one AEW pay-per-view is clearly worth like 3 PLEs, you know? Because you get to see 3 times the wrestling, right? And honestly, I'm looking at the times, because I'm looking at Wikipedia to see how many matches there were, right? And some of these matches are like 30 minutes long. So it's not like, you know, they had like 12 matches, but they were all 5 minutes. You're getting a lot more bang for your buck, if you will, right? Now, you have to pay for it, but that's another business model situation, right? But at least what you're paying for, has some sort of validity. You know, with the PLEs, it just feels like an over-bloated Raw. And when I say over-bloated, I mean it's exactly like Raw. It's 3 hours, 80% is commercials, and you get a few wrestling matches here and there. So this is not a sustainable model. Like, the viewership keeps going down. Like, Raw is basically dead in the water. I never thought I'd see this. Dead in the water, you know? And nobody really talks about it. Nobody really talks about just the fact that this show that can now has to manipulate the metrics. The equation went from one thing to another. You know, I'm gonna harken back to one of my life heroes, Patrice O'Neal, to finish this video. You know, in an old clip on Opie and Anthony, Patrice O'Neal, rest in peace, he made a point where he was like, you know, all of a sudden now with movies, he was talking about movies. He's like, with movies, we're looking at like the international gross. He's like, remember when it was just America, right? Where we only look at how much money this movie made in America. That was the metric that mattered, right? Because that is the country that makes the movie. So the question is, does it appeal to these people? You know, or is it some generic bullshit that can appeal to everybody? With wrestling, it's even worse. Because wrestling is, for better or for worse, Americana. There are other cultures that are, you know, represented, like Latinos and Asians, you know, but wrestling is America, right? Bobby Lashley is an American hero who served in, I think he was a combat, you know, infantry, whatever the fuck he was, right? And he's presented as such. He's presented as this great American, right? Or either way, if he's a heel, just an American, right? Now, wrestling is full of foreigners that have these, like, they don't even have foreign incentives. They're just like foreigners because we don't have enough cool Americans, you know? And like, the idea is, when you do this, you might broaden your global audience, but what about the audience that brought you to the dance? You're completely forsaking them. And I'm not saying that Americans cannot get behind Drew McIntyre. Obviously, a lot of them do. I'm sure a lot of them would literally like to get behind Drew McIntyre, the sick bastards who watch wrestling for different reasons. But the point is, like, wrestling used to be Americana. And if it cannot draw 2 million Americans, then it's a failed product, right? Wrestling, nobody can disagree. It's no longer mainstream, right? Other industries like NFL, video games, anime, I would imagine, have completely overtaken wrestling. You know, wrestling used to be ahead of these motherfuckers, but now it's not, right? And who do we have to blame? In my opinion, complacent, suggestible fucks like Triple H. People in charge who, instead of saying, you know what, fuck Dave Meltzer, I'm not going to push Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have them job the next night to Pretty Deadly, who actually have some character. And I'm using Pretty Deadly as a shit example because there's nothing special about them either, but at least they have character. They have personalities, you know? I'm going to have them lose to, like, listen, I remember that big fat black guy on NXT. I don't know if he's still around. Quincy Elliott. He was like this fat black guy, and his gimmick is that he's like the ultimate diva or something, right? He's gay, and he like thinks he's a diva. Great character, great gimmick. How about feed Kevin Owens to this guy? You know? How about try putting people over that are entertaining and interesting? But no, that's not where the market is anymore, because Dave Meltzer has been able to pretty much turn the wheel of the ship so far that now we look at things like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, and we're supposed to feel privileged to see this botch fest, right? I'll never forget the end of this match. Kevin Owens tries to do like an apron powerbomb to Sami Zayn, but neither he nor Sami are strong or athletic enough to be able to pull it off. So they have to switch the spot until he gently lets him down on the apron. Sami Zayn fights back, and then Kevin Owens tries again and does it. You see what I'm saying? That's where we're at now, right? A match with like a botched finish is a 5-star match. Like, have you lost your mind? Like, Shawn Michaels has botched fewer times in his career than Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens did in that match. You know? And how many 5-star matches does HBK have? Like 1 or 2? Fuck out of here with that bullshit. Kurt Angle has none. I'm supposed to believe that Johnny Gargano and Sami Zayn are better than Kurt Angle? This is the problem, right? The problem is not even Dave Meltzer doing it. It's the rest of us that have just fallen along with it, including Triple H, where he's like, I think I'm going to hire, like, you know, this ROH prospect because this guy is going to, like, revolutionize the game, you know? And it's like, is he? Or is he going to run the same boring-ass match for years, and then eventually some people are going to pretend it's good, and you're going to try to gaslight all of us into thinking that it's good? I fucking skipped all, and I will continue to do so, skip all Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens segments because they are on the haters' ban list, and that's just a fact, motherfucks. And with that being said, you know, this has turned into like a mini rant, but yeah, you know, like, it is what it is. I'll see you guys, what's today? I'll see you guys tomorrow probably for Raw review, and we'll go from there. Cooks!